This is Success in Excess, where elite founders, lawyers, and clinic owners engineer success through strategy, scale, and systems. Powered by GrowthX.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Success in Excess, the GrowthX podcast where we dissect what it really takes to outgrow limits, scale with intention, and build a brand that outlives trends. Now, GrowthX is the #1 partner for law firms' growth marketing. With over $100 million in revenue generated and over $10 million in ad spend, we have perfected the art of scalability and sustainability in the legal space. Now, today's guest is the definition of fearless leadership in the courtroom and the boardroom. Meet Yenisey Rodriguez-McCloskey Esquire, founding partner of Rodriguez-McCloskey PLLC, a Brooklyn-based powerhouse firm with over 20 years of legal firepower, specializing in construction law, real estate, employment law, and commercial litigation. She's not just winning cases, she's architecting impact. Let's get into it. Yenisey, introduce yourself. Tell us about what your early roots are. What part of your story do people mostly miss? And, what got you into the field of law?
Good afternoon, Tarun. Thank you for asking that question. It's a good one. So I am Cuban American. I came over in 1980 from Cuba. And what got me into the law was my early experiences being an immigrant. My father's a doctor, and he passed his licensing exams very quickly and was accused of cheating. Got a lawyer, like we do in America, got a lawyer and sued the licensing authority and won. And we went from a really small house where I was sharing a room with my grandmother and my great-grandmother to starting to live the American dream, all because of the help and support of the legal community and the justice system.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, guys, most of you might not know this, but isn't Cuba well known for their premium healthcare, like having great doctors just overall?
Yes, so Cuban doctors travel the world, and particularly in third world countries where medical aid is not available. They're highly educated people, and particularly the doctors are very well regarded.
Awesome. So because of your father's journey, and you saw how much an attorney can help an individual get their justice and actually preserve, what they've worked so hard for, that kind of puts you on the path to law. But let me ask you a little bit more. So how did you get into business law, construction law? What was your early roots as being an attorney? I'm pretty sure as we spoke, you came from a bigger firm. Journey transpired.
So in law school, I clerked as a law student for a judge by the name of Judge Charles Ramos, who's very well known and regarded. He was a commercial judge. And I got a real flavor for business and commercial litigation. And when I went into practice, I worked for a mid-sized firm that was very traditional in its approach. It had, trust and estates, real estate, corporate litigation departments. And I was predominantly part of the litigation department, which consisted of 8 male lawyers at the time. I was one of 2 associates, and I was the only minority in the entire attorney population of the firm, as far as not woman, but as far as being born in another country and of Latino descent. So in that firm, I really learned how to practice law, and I learned a lot of great lessons from a commercial litigation standpoint and how to strategically litigate. But I also learned what not to do. I was 24 years old when I started practicing law, and I was very new. I was really kind of ready to absorb anything that came my way. And part of what I learned is that lawyers put the business of law ahead of the client needs. And unfortunately, the client really doesn't ever learn that until they see that they don't have a return on their investment. They've invested time and money into getting a result that was not promised, because we're not allowed to promise, but strongly suggested. And when that result is not exactly what they want, there's really no recourse at that point, right? So, for instance, if you litigate and you get a money judgment, and your adversary doesn't have any money, your judgment's just a piece of paper. It's worthless. So, I learned sort of a lot of great techniques and a lot of great skills, but I also learned that there was a different path than, litigating a case to death. And the path was really mindful, strategic planning from the get-go, learning your client, who your client is, what their objectives are, what the case is really worth, what the upside and what the downside is. Early on, not as you progress through the case, but right up front. And then with your client, collaborating and coming up with a plan that they're a part of, that's fully transparent. You estimate as best you can all the fees for all the different potential avenues. And the strategy going forward becomes a collaboration. There's full transparency with the client, and it really involves them in the decision that only they can really make. I always tell clients, I'm not here to spend your money. It's your decision. It's your money, and how we move forward really depends on your objectives. And not everyone's objectives is rip the guy's throat out, let's get them. Sometimes you get those pound of flesh people, and sometimes they're good clients, and sometimes they're just so angry that they're not a fit. They're not seeing things reasonable way. But a lot of times clients have been told, they meet with various lawyers, they've been told the only path forward is a lawsuit. And that's just simply not true. There are all kinds of alternatives like mediation and arbitration. There's also the alternative, which a lot of real litigators don't do at all, which is just calling up the other side and saying, hey, let's have a meeting and let's try to flesh out how we resolve this. It is invaluable to be able to do that. A way that's not adversarial, but that is really collaborative in getting everyone to a table to talk about the problems.
Well, speaking of that, Yenisey, you talk about making sure the client is put first. And, that's something that generally the mass population or the audience in general usually sees attorneys as kind of cutthroat, looking for that pound of flesh. And you took a whole different perspective, and you were able to scale that, make a very successful firm, create even more successful relationships. And I can assume that going against the general status quo might have had some rifts in the beginning. How did you see that kind of play out, where a lot of clients, you brought up a big factor. If you pursue a client, right, you're working for a client and you pursue somebody, like you're trying to get money from them in a settlement. If they don't have any money, there's really no purpose going after them, because you said plain as day, it's just a piece of paper. You can't collect from somebody that has nothing to collect. So using that very powerful move of tact, making sure that at the end of the day, you're treating your client as the number one priority. How did that really take off in the beginning when you started your firm? And really, how can we see that Rodriguez-McCloskey PLLC isn't your typical firm? What is that strategic edge that you guys are bringing that kind of makes you shine outside of the rest of the competition?
So it started really early on in my career, and it was people driven. In addition to being a lawyer, I genuinely like people. I like interacting with people. I like learning about them. And early on in my practice, I didn't originate any business. The clients would be assigned to me, but I had to interface with them a lot. And in interfacing with them, I realized that what we were doing wasn't necessarily aligned with who they were and what they wanted. And I tried to, as best I could as a young associate, align our interests. And that grew eventually to me deciding that I had to start my own firm, because I didn't really see that approach being applied by anyone that I knew, at least. I'm sure that there are other lawyers that do it, but certainly no one that I've known then or now, frankly. But the idea was really to understand the client and be able to work within the client's objectives. And to your question, the clients really respond very favorably to this approach. And I would say that I have clients that have been with me for my entire career, that have followed me around from my first firm to the second firm, which was with a few partners from the first firm where I became a partner very early on, to present day. Because I built not only an attorney-client relationship, but a friendship, a reliance on my legal opinion, my opinion really about any life decision that involves the law. And it stems from caring about people and caring about the relationship that I built and nurturing it and having it grow.
Beautiful. Well, you clearly think like a CEO. How does that mindset shape your legal strategy?
So day to day, I manage the firm. And I'm involved strategically in all decision making. I don't do the day-to-day work. We have associates that will perform that work, but the framework is the same, right? The framework is analyze the issue up front. Don't just be reactionary, but analyze the question posed and the variables so we can provide a mindful result within the client objectives. And I take that really simple concept and I apply it really to the business itself. Okay, what are our needs, whether they're financial projections, whether they're staffing, whether they're growth, and I analyze, the potential options and I proceed from there. For instance, when I started the firm, a lot of people just want to make money and just want to churn associates, and that's been the traditional law firm model. I didn't want to do that. I was that associate that was there till 4 a.m. getting out of motion when everyone went home and they weren't paying secretaries or paralegals overtime. So that was never my intent going in. It wasn't to make a quick buck. It was to build a team strategically. So part of what we do is we don't waste time because we're thinking about things in a very strategic way from the beginning. I don't have 20, 30 hours of extra billable that have to either be discounted or charged to the client for junk work. I have a solid strategy going forward. The client knows what we're doing, knows the time that's going to be expended on it. If there are any surprises, we're transparent about it as far as, oh, wow, the law changed or the adversary filed this crazy motion. We have to deal with it. It's the same strategic planning that goes into the business, goes into the practice of law, the successful practice of law.
Absolutely. And that's something that a lot of people get lost in the translation of life and just working. You build strategies for your clients. In my own company, we build strategies for our clients and we focus on their growth and success. But at times, companies specifically, they have all this focus and direct admiration for the client, and they lose sight of growing their own company. And how have you been able to balance that actively and successfully to make sure while your clients are getting the quality service that you guys provide, while still maintaining the growth of your firm, the quality of the firm, and making sure that you're still on the trajectory going forward?
Part of that is, there's two facets from my perspective on that. One is have good clients. Be selective. Make sure that your clients' objectives are aligned with yours. And often it's also your ethics are aligned. So at the get-go, try to make sure that this is a client you can work with long term. And it's not just a one-off situation where some clients will think, even though you tell them, oh, this is a retainer, you're going to pay towards the service, there may be additional charges, and you say all that up front, they figure they pay one bill and they never have to pay another bill again. Now, that's very problematic, especially if you have some significant litigation and there are facets to it. No matter how you explain it, there are people that will not listen to you and they think they'll give you X and that should cover everything. So we try to avoid those types of scenarios with clients that are not listening. Part of it is understanding where the client is meeting you, right? So some people are really sophisticated and others are not. And this is not directly related to education or anything else. It is really a kind of a personal thing. I've met really successful, high net worth people that just didn't get the day-to-day nuance of being a lawyer and what it took. And you had to really explain it to them. You can't assume that people know what you're doing, right? And the second phase of that is really to monitor your growth. And it's pure business. You have to have a proper bookkeeper, have an accountant. Those are basic things, but you have to actually look at your numbers, look at the trends, look at what's changing during the healthcare crisis. Things changed dramatically during the financial crisis. Before that, things changed dramatically. And you have to keep on top of those trends. Also, technology, AI, Google, the omnipotent Google, you have to figure a way to move forward and not be stagnant. I worked early on with a lot of lawyers that kind of stopped. And I think of always, and this is a silly analogy, of people in high school that were like prom king and queen. And that was it. And that's their whole life was about that. And now they're, well, almost 49 like me, and they're still talking about it. We've got to move forward. We've got to progress. That's what life is all about. And so finding the things that excite you about changes in AI, in the law, and moving forward really helps to build your practice. It helps to bring in new clients, and it just helps to keep you engaged, because I've been doing this a long time. And if I was just doing the same thing every day, it wouldn't be interesting. And at some point you disconnect from it.
You brought up a good topic, being on the cutting edge, constantly changing, moving forward. And a lot of business models sometimes fail to, I guess, acclimate to the new environment. And especially in the legal field, which some of my listeners will not approve of this, and some of them will be adamantly accepting. It is an old boys club, and generally law firms are the last of all industries to translate or move on to the newer technologies, because they're very used to having success in the way that they've done things. They're very stuck in the old ways. And you see a firm like yourself that is really on the cutting edge, really moving forward, staying with the change of times, implementing new strategies, new concepts, new technologies into your firm. And that's probably why you've seen such a stratospheric success. You know, you've escalated so high in such a small period of time, where some attorneys, if you look at them, they spend 30, 40 years practicing law, and they're still stuck at that $30,000-$40,000 a month range, maybe never even getting an associate, sticking with one paralegal. So you've really been able to push that. And what we say is, you're not just practicing law, you're scaling legacy. What's that operator's edge? How do you collect from a client? And I think in one of our earlier discussions, you had mentioned that you just got to be upfront and be like that. Where if a client, they may think it's just a one-time payment, they don't really understand the scope of the work that you're actually doing, how much in research goes into it, how much actual work actually goes into it. They think it's as simple as, you show up in court, you put up your argument, or you fill a document and out, and it's just that. What really is that defining moment for you that can really put a client and let them understand, the work that you do is so valuable in so much depth in so many different ways?
So I think that comes down to communication. And I mentor a lot of young lawyers. I really enjoy the sort of the young minds and the excitement associated with coming into this profession, particularly those that are entrepreneurs and are looking to start on their own and need some guidance, because it's really challenging to do that. And years ago, I mentored a gentleman, really nice guy, and he was able, which is very unusual, to get clients as like a first year on his own. And he would get these clients. He had a very strong community. He grew up in New York. He knew a lot of people, and he would get these really great cases, but then he couldn't keep them. And I would sit down with him and I'd say, listen, you're getting the business. You're a rainmaker. This is great, but you need to be able to keep it, and you have to keep it by communicating that you can do the work, right? So it's not only doing the work, it's explaining the work so that your client understands what you're doing. And the other thing, and it's not lost on me that I'm a woman, is being strong. So your position is not a may position, it's a must position. When you convey yourself to clients, to opposing counsel, you must be strong in your presentation. That doesn't mean being rude. It doesn't mean being disrespectful. But your position must be stern and strong. And that really goes a long way. So in our practice, you come in here, you're a client, you ask us to, let's say, file the summons and complaint. We collaborate with you on the allegations. We send it to you. Every client is different. Some clients want to be all hands on deck. Some want to be a little bit more detached. But every step of the way, you know exactly what's going on. And it's so easy now with AI. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's straightforward, but you can send an update for everything, and it could be really detailed. I will dictate an update because I don't like the automatic generated updates. I think that they're a little bit too basic. So I will dictate an update. I will throw it in AI. I will get a proper, whether it's a memo if it's longer or it's an email. I edit it and I send it. If that takes 10 minutes, that's overstating it. And I don't bill for under 10 minutes. So a lot of times they're just free updates because things are progressing and you want them to understand when they get a bill exactly what happens. A recent example, I had this motion. It was a mammoth set of papers. And it was a motion that, quite frankly, we shouldn't have won. And we made this argument. It was a half-page argument asking the court to stay the action because it was related to another larger case that was up on appeal that I had won and the opposing counsel had appealed. So I put all the papers in AI, all public record, publicly filed documents, and I said, spit me out an outline because this client has paid a tremendous amount of money towards legals, and we've won every step of the way, but as of right now, we're stopped pending appeal. There's a bond until we can defeat the appeal. They haven't gotten their money. So long story short, I spit all the documents into AI. I got this great outline. I saved probably 16 hours of time in creating my own outline from scratch. I still read all the papers, and AI actually came up with some spins on the arguments that were really interesting. I went into court. I argued the stay piece, which was a half a page of my 40-page brief. It was 2 briefs, and I won. And the court was fully persuaded that I was right, that this made the most sense. It made the most practical sense. It had very little actual legal support. But it was a combination of not billing the client 100 hours for something that you could use technology, getting a win, and then so this client had a pretty big bill. And I called the client and I explained what went on. And not only did I extol the win, but I also extolled the savings associated with using these tools. This particular client is an old school guy. You can send him as many emails as you want. He's not going to read them. He's not going to understand them, and he's not going to care. But a phone call with an update, of course, it helps to win, but a phone call with an update and an explanation got me a check the next day, and not a small check. But it's the communication. It's doing the work and being able to communicate it in an effective way.
And seeing that, the way that you move forward, AI is taking over pretty much every industry that we live in today. And what I've seen a lot of times, which makes you very unique in that way, is people get lazy, right? They use AI, and as it is, it's already saving you 95% of the time. And a lot of people just throw it in the AI, and then whatever gets spit out, they post it, they present it, they send it, and they don't take and understand, hey, it would have taken me 5 hours to create this document, strategize it, come up with the concept, maybe 10 hours. It spit it out in 15 minutes. I should take the time to read it, edit it, personalize it, and then present it. And that's what you do, and you're able to use and wield that power so effectively, where a lot of people, they're afraid because if you don't train people correctly, and I can even say in my own personal experience, when AI first started coming out, especially ChatGPT, some of my staff would use ChatGPT, and I ended up having to take it away for a time period because I said, guys, what normally would take you 3-4 hours to do is taking you 10 minutes. Just take the time and understand, hey, you just saved yourself 3.5, 4 hours, 5 hours worth of time. Take another 30, 45 minutes and customize it so it's really targeting what we need to target, and don't just pop it in AI and send it off, because AI can get a lot of it done for you, but you have to still put your own spin on it, put your own expertise, put your own knowledge and apply it to that and use it correctly. And if used correctly, just like in your instance, it can be very strategic, very powerful, and very lucrative. And you're being able to wield that. Now, to our audience who doesn't really know much about, let's inform them. What do you do for your clients? So you handle construction law, business litigations, but really tell us what an ideal client would look like for you, and what is it that you actually handle for them that brings you the big bucks and brings the value to them in that value proposition.
So I represent predominantly business owners, startups, businesses that are ongoing, large and small, individual business owners as well. I have some representation of private clients, but I would say about 90% of my work revolves around helping businesses succeed. And part of that is, from a startup standpoint, setting a business up correctly. It doesn't cost a whole lot to start a business. A lot of people set up their business, let's say, through an accountant. And an accountant charges for setup. A setup is a phone call. There's a company called CSC. They do everything for you. It's a fee, depending on the state you want. It's a national company. It's super easy. It doesn't cost anything. We don't charge for setting up because there's nothing to charge for. It's a phone call. What we do charge for is if setting up a membership interest agreement, setting up bylaws, making sure if it's not a single owner, that it's clear what each person is doing and what their rights to money once the business makes money is. And I say that because a lot of people don't have those conversations if you don't have a lawyer. And I've had this so many times over the years, before the business even makes money, they start fighting about money. And I will sit down and I'll say, listen, you haven't even made any money yet. Why are you fighting about something that doesn't even exist? So who's doing what and how are you generating revenue and what's the split going to be? And so those conversations that sometimes are really difficult when people are partnering with each other, a lot of times it's friends and you're kind of embarrassed to talk about these things. And I kind of just lay it all out on the table and make sure we can iron it out. Once again, those initiating documents are not necessarily an expensive endeavor. It depends on the business. It depends on the sophistication, but they're helpful down the line because you're building blocks to avoid conflict, to avoid litigation, which is really my strong suit is what can we do to make sure you are not involved in litigation? And if we are involved in litigation because, say, there's an employee issue or something happens, how are we protected based on the framework that's been set up? So when I have the pleasure of starting a business, we started up in the right way and we made sure the employees being hired were compliant with handbook rules, offer letters, employment agreements, whatever is needed, that people aren't hired as contractors when they're really employees, because that is a surefire way to get into trouble. I had a client who had the Department of Labor come in and investigate and charge $1 million for back payment, and we got it reduced to about $7,000 after a lot of back and forth. But she had her bookkeeper handle the initial discussions with the Department of Labor, and the bookkeeper just wasn't able to convey what needed to be conveyed. So I had to come in at a high-level meeting with the head of the Department of Labor in the city and the client and the bookkeeper, and we had to go one by one through every independent contractor and or employee. And we came up with a really great settlement compared to what was actually originally out there. But that's an example of something that could have been completely avoided if the paperwork would have been correct and the bookkeeping would have been on point. And I came in when it was the emergency scenario. And in this case, I was able to save in an emergency scenario, but not always, which is why the framework is so important. If you have the framework down, then these issues are completely avoidable. With respect to ongoing existing businesses, we come in and sometimes, you meet a business owner, it's a small business, they're a little hesitant to let you see what they do, see their full operation. So we'll come in and just little by little revise their employment agreements, handle a termination, and then they get more comfortable with us. And then they'll show us their materials, and we'll act as outside counsel as issues come up, and we'll make sure that those issues are resolved in a way that doesn't end up in litigation. And same thing with the individual business owner. I've represented countless entrepreneurs that have multiple ventures, and I'll come in on one thing. I had one client I came in on during COVID. He had a bunch of restaurants he had to close. And the thought was he was going to declare bankruptcy. And I was like, what? Why are you declaring bankruptcy? This doesn't make any sense. It's going to cost you so much money to do that. Let's dissolve the entities and let's negotiate out of the leases. And I negotiated out of everything, and it cost so much less than any bankruptcy, not to mention the look back periods, the complexity of the bankruptcy, the length of time that they take. But the initial strategy was so important. And, flash forward 2 years later, the same owner tasked me with a much bigger litigation. Trusted me, huge case, major company, and all because I developed the trust on a prior matter.
Okay. So the audience knows who you serve, how you serve them. Now let's talk a little bit about the firm in a little bit more depth. You're not the traditional personal injury, criminal defense, immigration firm. You guys handle complex contract law, dealing with member agreements, things of that nature for various startups, entrepreneurs, or even ongoing businesses. So how does marketing work for a firm like this? And how have you guys found success in your marketing endeavors, and where would the audience learn from some of the obstacles you've overcome and some of the losses that you've overcome as well? What has worked, what hasn't worked for the firm?
So when I started the business, it was all word of mouth. It was traditionally, as you said, lawyers and law firms are dinosaurs, right? They don't change. They don't transition very easily. They do things the old-fashioned way. At my first firm, they had a website about 5 years after I started there. So we're talking 2005. Really long. I mean, it was kind of backwards to me because I was a young person and I didn't really understand. Later on at my second firm, the same thing happened. They were kind of hesitant to even market. There was no market. The thought was, you're going to find me because I'm good. And we were good. So people did find us. Well, that worked very well, I will say. And that is kind of the traditional approach. No marketing, just word of mouth. Now, when I started my own firm, I had a different approach in mind. Part of it was I traditionally had worked in New York County and in Westchester, and my firm was going to be situated in Kings County because I walked to work and I wanted the work-life balance. So I wanted to make sure I was not kind of leaving money where I could make it here in Kings County in my home. So I set up a website and I was able to, right off the get-go, have 2 or 3 clients that knew me start doing business with me in Kings County. And initially, really, it was a kind of an extension of word of mouth, which was I was in court arguing motions in multi-district litigation in state and federal court. Other people would see me, they would know me, or they liked what I did, and we would network. And I had the website, I had sort of the placeholder website, and I would mainly launch favorable decisions on the website. And I would network with existing clients and kind of what they call upsell, but just talk to them about how to alleviate litigation, how to mitigate damage, how to be successful without these kind of litigations that kind of stymie your business. So that led to the COVID period. So during the COVID period, there was no court at all. And I had to figure a way to rebrand and to get the word out there. And we updated our website, we did a newsletter, we set up social media, we, once again, posted any wins or anything going on. And I also networked with my existing client base, which is so important, right? So calling people up, seeing what they're doing. I did a lot of just health check-ins. I have a lot of entrepreneurs that are male and female that are on their own, that they're single and they're on their own. They're older, some are younger, but there was this kind of fear that something bad was going to happen. So I was reaching out to everyone, and that was not necessarily a marketing tool so much as just being a human being, but certainly it led to connectedness, right? And we weren't seeing each other, but we were talking on the phone, and it led to connectedness, and a lot of work came my way during a period where a lot of people had no work. I had a 9-day arbitration during COVID, and the case was a COVID-related construction termination case, which I was litigating throughout the COVID period. So all the courts are closed, not much is going on. Unless you had arbitration work, you were kind of dead in the water. There was nothing to do. So I had a lot of that work came my way during that period, which really helped me keep everyone employed that I had then, keep my office on and working. I mean, we were working remotely, but it really kept everything going. And actually, I made a profit that year, which seems kind of unheard of considering what's going on. And I also had a lot of restaurants that I represented earlier in my career that I was outside counsel for. I love to eat. New York is an amazing restaurant town. So I knew a lot of entrepreneurs in that space that unfortunately were closing or negotiating, winding down their space and getting out. So I also had reached out to them, or they reached out to me in that process. And the last thing I did, which was purely just to help the community, is I put myself out there as assisting with SBA loans or helping people that were struggling in getting things together and in order. In my spare time, I was doing a lot of research on what was available, what grants were being offered, what loans you could get. And I wanted to impart that knowledge that I was using from a personal standpoint and making sure the business was going to survive, because you knew how long this period was going to be, to impart that wisdom to others. And I did help a lot of people keep their businesses afloat while they were closed. Flash forward to now, we are continuing with the social media, the newsletters, the word of mouth, keeping clients kind of have us in their mind and present. And we are adding the SEO and the back pages and all that other fun stuff that is highly recommended, and the Google reviews. We are very much in the beginning processes of that journey, because as of a few years ago, the SEO, everyone was like, no, you can't do it because you're so specialized and your field is more word of mouth and blah, blah, blah. These were the actual SEO people telling me this. And more recently, with further discussion and you're just modernizing the system, everything kind of coming through, I think of it, and I know I've read this somewhere, it's not my original thought, that it's really like the Industrial Revolution, what's going on now, just with AI. And it's really, business as we know it is changing at a very fast clip, and we have to kind of adjust. So I'm figuring ways to do that, talking to other entrepreneurs, talking to people in your space, and just figuring out the tools that I want to use and how they will play out, so I can reach a larger audience, the younger members of society that are kind of only in that space and not really looking at word of mouth and sort of the traditional tools I've previously used.
You brought that topic up, SEO. And I'm sorry that other members in my industry would have told you that doesn't apply, or too highly specialized. As a company that's won numerous awards, in fact, last year we won the best law firm marketing agency in the United States for 2024. SEO has changed so much in the past couple of years, especially with the integration of AI, that it doesn't matter whether or not you're operating a cath lab for medical procedures or you're a highly specialized business attorney. 95% of people that are searching for business services in any field, from where they're going to go to eat to where they're going to get their surgery to who's the next attorney going to represent them on their case or even advise them on their business dealings, is done via search engines. And even more so with AI integration. I was just dealing with a client recently that said, people don't really use AI to do their search. Well, most people don't realize that AI is now integrated automatically into Google, where if you do a simple search now, and it could be just, what's the best Chinese restaurant near me? You're going to have a list on Google Maps and the top websites that are going to be ranked. But even then, there's going to be a snippet from Gemini saying, hey, in your area, in your location, let's say you're in Brooklyn, and 0.25 miles away, there's a Chinese restaurant, let's use a random name like, the Chinese Dragon. And that just shows that AI is integrated, whether you use it or not, or you think that it's going to be applicable. It's very much changing. And we are in the new industrial revolution. We had the industrial revolution, we had the internet boom, and now we're in the AI revolution. And if you're not changing, you'll have residual results. And there's a lot of law firms. Here's a statistic that we know, and this is a fact. 95% of businesses have not transitioned over to AI. That means that only 5% has. Now, the 5% that has are going to be on the new wave, riding it and get the benefits. And the other 95%, they're still seeing their business grow. They're still continuing to see business growth. And the problem is we have a business concept which is called residual results, where we can do good work today and stop promoting, and we are still going to have residual results and bring clients in for the next 3 to 6 months, maybe even push it out a year. But once all that residual flow is, kind of seceded, what happens then is you kind of just totally have a fall off point, where now is more important than ever to have SEO implemented into your firm. Social media is very important, even if you're highly specialized. The thing is, all these systems and multimedia channels like LinkedIn, email marketing, SEO, social media, ad programs, they all work in a unified concept that build out your business overall domain ranking and authority, which then puts you in front of the people that you need to be in front of. So that way you get the high income earners, the entrepreneurs, the startup guys that need your specialty. And being on top of that just shows you're forward thinking. You're really somebody that is not just looking to have a business. You're looking to build a legacy. You're looking to build something that's multi-generational, where you could take your firm and it can be successful for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And if you wanted, and if your children wanted it, they could run the firm as well, because you're building a foundational presence that is not for 1 year, but for 20, 30 years on coming. Now, one of the things that we look at when it comes to legal marketing is, where is the value proposition? Where is the return on investment? So how many years have you had your firm now?
10.
10 years. So first off, guys, congratulate Yenisey, because 10 years is that milestone point where majority of firms, guys, 90% of firms do not make it past 5 years. And the other part, you only have a very small percentage to make it to 10 years successfully, while overcoming one of the most dramatic health crises the world has ever seen. We had COVID. In that time, so many businesses went out. And if you weren't transitioning, if you weren't assimilating and acclimating to the environment and moving on to digital and virtual, you were falling apart. And I know personally firms that, when it started becoming Zoom court meetings, arbitrations that were being done virtually, they really didn't want to go with it. And they actually turned clients down because they didn't think it was going to exist. But I have a client currently who's on the president of the bar of Florida, who now he actually helped institute that all cases are now done via Zoom, unless it's something that's serious criminal matter where they have to be in court. But now majority of the cases, it's more efficient. It's more streamlined. The lawyers are able to do more work in a smaller amount of time. And it just makes a usually inefficient system more inefficient. Because, guys, the court system, unfortunately, our attorneys are highly efficient, but the system that they work with is not. And it's on our attorneys to build up those efficiency systems, higher performance, higher results. And that's what Yenisey is doing with her firm. So let me ask you this. We're going to close up pretty soon, but what's the next chapter for the firm? Yenisey, tell us what it is.
First of all, my husband, who's been in sales for 25 years, is going to be joining the firm as a lawyer in the fall. So we're going to have, thank you. So we're going to have a true collaboration at home and here. And with that, we're going to scale slightly up to just accommodate another associate and likely a law student or two. I plan on doing some more social media and SEO and building that audience base, and really just learning more about this great world we live in with all the tools that are available. I mean, last November, I went to an event at the City Bar. I had been using AI a little bit, but I was blown away at all the functionalities and also its limitations, because as it was explained to me then, it's basically like a college student, right? So it can get you part of the way there. But, don't discount the human mind and our experience. We're going to get the rest of the way there. And that's how I've been using it. But as it advances, we're going to inevitably advance, and we're going to free up time to do other things, both legally and in our personal lives. So it's really an exciting time to be a lawyer. I always say that as long as you continue to learn and grow, your practice will continue to grow, because that's really what builds it. It's like they used to say, like, always be a curious child. In law school, like, be that child that's looking at everything and like really absorbing the world around you. And that's exactly what running a business, being a lawyer, particularly in this world right now, is all about.
So she couldn't have said it better. At the end of the day, Rodriguez-McCloskey PLLC is changing the way that we do law. The way that she approaches her client relationships, the way that she handles from going to litigation and understanding where the client's benefits are. If you're seeking a business attorney that has the prowess, the power, and the mindset to really get you past and succeed and win that race, Yenisey is probably the best attorney on the East Coast. With over 3,000% success in scaling in over 10 years, having a 3,000% growth is just astronomical. Most people don't get that in their whole career. And Yenisey really just embodies what a 2025 attorney should be. Savvy, tech savvy, smart, successful in business. She understands finances, and most important, she understands how to work with people. She understands people, and that's a trait that's usually lost when it comes to the legal field because it's usually very black and white. It's all about documents and papers. But realize behind all those documents and papers, they're representing real human beings that have real feelings, that real nurturing, real emotions, and they may be going through a very hard time, and maybe it's just business law. But for some people, their business is their life. It's something that they've grown and built from their blood, sweat, and tears. It's their embodiment. It's their it's their identity. It's who they are at the end of the day. When you ask them who they are and what they are, their business is really how they identify themselves. And that's what she does. She helps them save it, build it, grow it, and make it even a better version. Now, as we wrap this up, I have to ask, where can our listeners find you online?
So my website is Rodriguez-McCloskey.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Whether you hit me up personally, I have my own page, or through the firm, which is all Rodriguez-McCloskey PLLC on those sites. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm here to help you.
Well, I have a final question for you. What's one mindset shift you want every listener to walk away with today?
So the concept of conflict being bad. So I view the world as a conflict being an opportunity to find a different path forward. And a lot of times conflict leads to a new approach or something really that you just never anticipated. And I think it's important, people, when they're in the heat of battle or in the heat of conflict, they think that it's like crushing and the world is going to end. And it's really the start of something new and something else. And it can really be very beneficial to go through that process. I really came at this career really from the get-go, from the place of I like to argue, I like to fight, and I'm great at it. And I've always been great at it. I was a debater. I've done everything in that space. And I always viewed conflict sort of with that attitude. But as I got older, I also learned about mediation and using conflict and resolution as a path forward. And I think that in business, it's critical to view conflict as a potential opportunity rather than a roadblock.
Well, she is a lawyer through and through. She loves to argue. She's not afraid of conflict, guys. This conversation was pure clarity and power. Thank you for showing us that the legal game can be a launch pad, not a limitation. You've redefined what legacy law looks like. If today's episode sparked something in you, share it with a founder, a fighter, or someone building their empire from the ground up. Don't forget to follow, leave a 5-star review, and subscribe for more success and excess. Until next time, keep scaling, keep winning, and remember, Yenisey of Rodriguez-McCloskey PLLC, based in Brooklyn, is the go-to lawyer if you have any business law inquiries. I mean, guys, she's not just a 5-star lawyer. She is your advocate at your side every step of the way. And that's what we look for in our attorneys nowadays. You know, we want somebody that is going to shoot it straight, give us what we need, and guide us to the path of the least friction. And obviously, make sure that we get to success. Until next time, check in. We're always here. Thank you, guys.
Own your growth. Scale with systems powered by GrowthX. Subscribe to Success in Excess for those who lead with precision and scale with purpose.